Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about the basics of hair. We're not going to go too much into detail because there's a lot of stuff to cover, but we are going to cover things like form, shape, and flow, as well as some common mistakes that people tend to make. Lesson 1 is to always start broad and then add details later. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they focus too much on all of the details in the beginning instead of getting the overall shape down. When you do this, you tend to make your shapes flat and you tend to make them look really messy. So instead of worrying about drawing every single strand of hair, think about the individual shapes and then start to focus on the flow and how things look overall before you start to draw in the individual strands. This is going to make your drawing look more interesting and more natural. You can see the drawing on the left has really flat, kind of stringy looking hair versus the one on the right, which looks a little bit more natural and has a little bit more visual interest, as well as better flow and body to it. This applies to any hairstyle that you're drawing, so whether someone has a lot of hair or just a little bit, it's really important to focus on the big shapes first before you start to get caught up in the details. And remember, no matter how complicated a hairstyle may seem, it's always made up of basic shapes that you can break down so it's not so overwhelming and it's a little bit easier to understand. Lesson number 2 is to always draw through. What I mean by this is when you're drawing hair, make sure you're drawing the shape of the head underneath it first in your sketch. This way you'll avoid accidentally making the head look too small or flat because you're considering what's underneath the hair. It's the same idea as when you're drawing a person with clothes. You want to think about the shape of the body underneath the clothes so you don't draw a person who looks weird and out of shape. You also want to keep in mind your hair part and your hairline, even if you can't see them in your particular drawing, because this is the point at which the hair grows out of the head. If you want your drawing to look more believable, you really need to consider how the hair grows out of the head so it doesn't look like you just glued it on top of the person that you're drawing. Doing this is what's going to give your drawing both form and dimension. Lesson number 3, always think about line variation. In any drawing, having line variation is going to give it visual interest and make it look less flat. The same thing goes for when you're drawing hair. Make sure you're not making all of the lines of the strands of hair identical because it's going to make your shapes look flat and boring. Always have some that are a little bit thicker and a little bit thinner, and especially with things like hair, it can make it really interesting to have strands popping out. And finally, lesson number 4, always think about overlap. Hair isn't flat like a piece of paper. It's made up of a bunch of different locks that overlap each other to create form as it grows out of your head. In order to make it look like this in a 2D drawing, it's really important to think about the hair that's in front and the hair that's behind. As soon as you have pieces overlap each other, it gives a sense of form and dimension and gives the impression that you're drawing a 3-dimensional figure and not just a flat piece of paper. This is why it's so important to think about what's underneath the hair. When you think about the head as a 3-dimensional object, you can think about all the different points at which the hair grows out of the head. You can then apply this idea to your drawing, so you can think about where the hair would naturally grow, and in doing so, you're going to give your drawing more dimension, more visual interest, and make it more believable. Now, all of these are really helpful tips to keep in the back of your mind, but keep in mind they're not going to do anything unless you apply them in practice. Like anything else you're learning how to draw, the most important thing is to keep drawing it over and over again until it feels like second nature. It takes a long time to learn how to draw something, and it takes many, many hours of practice, so if you don't feel like you're getting it right away, that's okay. Study some people in real life, study some pictures, and keep drawing it until it feels like you know what you're doing. And honestly, artists evolve all the time anyway, so you're going to keep drawing and keep learning new things, and your style is going to keep evolving, but you are going to get to a point where you're really happy with how you're drawing, and that's what we're aiming for here. So don't be discouraged if you don't feel like you're getting it right away. I promise if you keep practicing, it will start to make sense over time, and as long as you stick with it, you will get better. So keep practicing, and good luck.